audio's live, Chair, even if you just
Okay.
want to go ahead.
So members and everyone else, we are open. Welcome to the 73rd meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 2022 to 27 mandate. The committee will be recorded and broadcast online and throughout Parliament buildings. Usual rules apply in relation to Wi-Fi and phones. Agenda item 1, our apologies. We have no apologies. We do have one member joining us on Zoom, and we're
also have
another one.
Deirdre and Jerry.
Yeah, Deirdre and Jerry who will join us via Zoom. Agenda item 2, declaration of interests. Does anyone have an interest they wish to declare at this point? No? Oh, sorry. Deputy Chair, yeah.
APS, the Education Minister.
Okay, no problem. Noted. Next agenda item is Chairperson's business, and the first agenda item on Chairperson's business, I'm actually going to go straight to, before we get to the 25, 26 further allocations, I'm going to talk about the other written ministerial statement that we have just got in the last couple of hours, which is the written ministerial statement from the Finance Minister in relation to the reserve claim. Now, you will have seen that landed with members and is now being reported in public. Indeed, it was discussed at Northern Ireland Questions in the Commons Chamber earlier on today. So the Minister of Finance published the reserve claims, obviously not in your pack or table pack. It's in hard copy in front of you. It will be for the record next week for the purpose of the record. There are 3 bits to it, I suppose, if I was trying to summarise it relatively quickly. First is the access to the reserve claim. This reserve claim that is being allowed or agreed by the Treasury will, the 400 million reserve claim will bring down the overspend, the in-year 25-26 overspend position of the executive as a whole, specifically the pressures of the Department of Education, which are just over 200 million, and the Department for Health, which are just under 200 million. That'll be reflected in the spring supplementary estimates. So that has, in a sense, dealt with that in-year pressure. However, or to deal with that, the repayment of this reserve will be pushed into next year and the next 3 financial years, 80 million in 26-27, 160 in 27-28, and 160 in 28-29. Those are also the 3 years of the proposed multi-year budget, which brings us on to the third and final component, which is that the Minister indicates that he is still endeavouring to secure agreement with his ministerial colleagues, the Finance Minister is, in relation to multi-year budget. We know that that has not been secured yet, but it is also, so he, the Minister says he wants to grasp the opportunity of a multi-year budget, but clearly it isn't agreed yet. However, there is, in addition to the reserve claim, and as part of his how he reflects on the multi-year budget, the Finance Minister tells us that the Executive will work with Treasury to review the Executive spending and pressures. This will support a fuller understanding of the significant challenges we are facing. Each department will have a crucial role in this work as they are best placed to articulate the challenges within their areas. This process will be firmly grounded in the principles of devolution and will respect the Executive's autonomy in making funding decisions. Separate to this, I believe Gavin Robinson MP has referred to an exercise, a discussion that he, I don't know if he's been party to these discussions, something called an open book exercise, which he referred to, I believe, happy to stand corrected, I believe he mentioned it in Northern Ireland Questions in the Commons a little while ago. So, members, there are many questions for us to ask. First of all, I think it's worth saying it's welcome that the in-year pressures will be dealt with. That's better than the alternative. It obviously is concerning that at a time of pressure on the multi-year budget, which isn't yet agreed, there's now an additional pressure, which is repayment of a reserve claim in each of the 3 years of the multi-year budget, should one ever actually be agreed. But we also need to understand, I think very urgently, what this apparent open book exercise is, because The Minister slightly slips it into the end of his written ministerial statement. Other people politically are talking about it, but I'm not entirely clear what it is, and I think this committee should be told, certainly before anybody else. I think it probably would have been preferable if this committee had found out before members of Parliament. We are, after all, the devolved Finance Committee, so I think we need to write urgently to the Minister to ask what has actually been agreed. I think in addition to that, we need to copy that to both the Treasury and NIO to ask for simultaneously their understanding of what has been agreed, because frankly I'm slightly sick, sore and tired of playing the game where you have to get slightly different, either contradictory or differing descriptions of what has been agreed. That was a challenge around the executive restoration package. So I would like urgently and in time for our next meeting, next week, certainly from the Finance Department and ideally from the NIO and Treasury, and they can give us one answer collectively, what exactly has been agreed. Is it an open book exercise? Is it a zero budget exercise? And how those discussions have happened, because at the minute it's not entirely clear what any of this means. Happy to bring in others. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and I agree with you. It's very welcome to see this, so we're not hitting straight into the first year of a multi-year budget period with a £400 million deduction and having to plan forward for that. And as Gavin Robinson MP outlined, like, it's a really clear example of Westminster and Stormont working well together and having our voices heard over there. But as Gavin had outlined, I haven't seen the transcript of what was said, and it'll be good to get that detail, but I totally support you in saying we need to write in to find out what exactly is happening. Gavin had outlined to us in communication that there's commitment to an open book line by line assessment of the executive's budget, and it gives us a good opportunity to move forward, not just rolling forward, but again, we're good to get that commitment of what it actually has been agreed. But as we look at transformation and what's coming forward, it's a really good opportunity to build on it. But yes, clarity, and in the short term, because the consultation's out right now on the multi-year budget, this changes the numbers and we need to see where those repayment figures are going to be deducted from.
Yes, so just for full disclosure, because for complete information, the DUP press release with Gavin Robinson's quote in it refers to, it says, an open book, the commitment to an open book line by line. It says, I'm pleased the government recognised the strength of the arguments we put forward, and I don't know if we means the DUP or individual MPs or I don't know, the executive, but if the UK government has agreed this with the DUP, have they told the Finance Minister? Has the Finance Minister been part of these conversations but not told the Assembly or other parts of the Executive? I think we need clarity on what exactly has been agreed here. Gavin Robinson's quote says, the commitment to an open book line by line assessment of executive budgets is therefore both reasonable and necessary. Accountability must sit at the heart of public spending. Last year's end point should not automatically become this year's starting point. Now, I think we need to understand, in addition to what we need to understand from the Finance Minister, we also need to understand from the UK Government whether they have agreed an open book, quote, an open book line by line assessment of executive budgets with the Finance Minister or with the DUP leader. I just think it's, for full disclosure, I think we need to understand all of those points, because neither the phrase open book nor line by line is reflected in the Finance Minister's written ministerial statement. And in addition to that, we obviously need an urgent update on where the multi-year budget is. I believe Owen Tennyson wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it was really just to concur with your proposal. I think it's absolutely appropriate that we as the committee write and get that clarity. This, of course, is a welcome and positive step in that it is temporarily easing the pressures on public services this year. And whilst it will steady the ship, it won't necessarily turn the tanker. And so I think we also need as a committee to look very closely at what the Executive is going to do now to tackle things like transformation of public services and the cost of division, to deal with the systemic issues and ensure we're not simply going to end up in this position again next year. So just to support the proposal, to welcome the intervention, but I think this is the start of a process. and it is essential that if there is a process between the executive and UK government, that's conducted in good faith and enables us both to make the case for fair funding for public services, but to tackle some of the waste and inefficiencies that we know are there. And I think it is regrettable. I would just say that many of us in this committee have talked on a number of occasions about the need for a zero-based budgeting exercise, and that has always been resisted by the department until we now find ourselves in this financial crisis, and we seem to be moving in what looks like that direction, but that's to be made clear in due course. So thank you, Chair.
Sure. Okay, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Sort of agree with what everybody else has said. Look, the key point of this was it's £400 million over 3 to 4 years, over a 66 odd billion sort of budget with inflation thrown in on the rest of it. It was always going to be reprofiled. The issue and the concern for this is that it's taken the pressure off some departments to reform. And I think my concern is, and I'm absolutely 100% positive about having it as an open book process, but I think that gives us more, makes me more determined than ever to make sure the Fiscal Council has a proper role to say in this. Because if we're going to have an open budget process with Treasury, I think the Fiscal Council should be given a formal role to look at sort of the budget process as it goes through as well. And I think that's something that is particularly important, and we've got an opportunity to do that. But thanks very much.
We obviously have an opportunity to do that through the legislation. I think that's really important. I also think it makes the case for transparency, because this has been an utterly opaque process. I, as chair of the Finance Committee, had no idea there were discussions going on between the UK government, the department, and apparently the leader of the DUP about an open book exercise on a multi-year budget process. I don't think that's good. We're a devolved Finance Committee. We haven't been told anything about this. The department has not indicated to us that this has happened. We now have a somewhat differing accounts of how it's happened. Certainly the 400 million is better than the alternative in year, but I think there's still a lot of doubt about what's been agreed over the next number of years. So yes, I agree with you, Dr. Aiken, about the Fiscal Council, but I also think it makes the case for why we need to be constantly robust, and probably why we need to be inserting ourselves into the Fiscal Council Bill to ensure transparency, because it is clear that, bluntly, the instinct for those involved in this decision was not to transparency. We knew nothing about this in our committee.
I need to make a declaration of interest, because I sit on British Irish Parliamentary Assembly and all the rest of it. Yeah. I was talking to the Welsh and the Scots. We all knew this was coming, and particularly because Labour are really concerned about what's happening in Wales and Scotland. This is they're rolling over. There's rollovers happening in Wales and rollovers happening in Scotland as well. This is not just on Northern Ireland. It's a process that Treasury have committed to across the piece, and I think it's not just our department, or not just Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. I think it might be other departments as well.
Well, if that's the case, I don't know if it's the case. If it's the case, then obviously the Treasury and NIA will be able to tell us that, and it will chime with what the Finance Minister says. But we haven't been told any of that, so you may have.
With respect, you may have heard that.
You may have had that in a conversation with parliamentarians in Scotland and Wales, but that's not the same thing as the Northern Ireland Assembly Finance Committee being told. Gemma Dolan and then Brian Kingston.
Yeah, I want to welcome this, obviously, but I don't know, Chair, what you're talking about. The Minister has said that he would be working with Treasury to, looking at a reserve claim. So I don't know, is that what you mean by? So the
Minister had said there have been conversations about a reserve claim, but in addition to the reserve claim, there is this conversation about a review of the executive budget process. It's been described in the written ministerial statement. Is to strengthen our case for fair funding of public services, the Executive will work with Treasury to review executive spending and pressures. It is described variously by the DUP leader, who appears to have been party to some of the discussions. I don't know in what context, as an open book exercise. I'm not saying there's necessarily anything malign or illegitimate has happened, but for transparency purposes, as the devolved Finance Committee, I think it's reasonable for us to ask.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough, but whatever the DUP leader says, that's up to him. But I do know the Finance Minister did blatantly say in the Chamber a number of times that he would be looking at a reserve claim. But I think the reserve claim is there's nothing like opaque about the reserve claim. There was a discussion going on, that was true. But I just think this eases a huge pressure. Our education and health have overspent, and all the more reason now to get a 3-year budget. Yeah. I think it's, in a sense, it's for us to be keeping an eye on the receipts and keeping track of all the discussions. And as has been pointed out, if it's part of the fiscal framework discussions, then I think we should have been kept abreast of that too. And I just think it makes the case for us constantly to be asking more, not less questions. And sometimes whenever people get frustrated at the numbers of matters arising, and I get that, and I don't think we should be doing it vexatiously, we do have to remember it's our job not simply to
either cheerlead or moan, but to keep across the detail. Brian Kingston.
Thank you, Chair. Just to welcome, indeed, as others have done, this reserve claim, and that there'll be 3 years then to pay that back, not one, which otherwise could have been the case, and to welcome the work that's gone into this, both by Gavin and colleagues at Westminster and by the Finance Minister. Steve said he felt it takes the pressure off departments here to reform, but I would comment both in Gavin's statement and in the Minister's statement. There's a strong emphasis on the need to reform and to prioritise efficiency, and I know that's easily said, but it is work that does seem to be getting increased priority. We saw that in the Education Minister's statement at the end of last week, a focus on seeing where there is the need to cut costs to bring in efficiency, and we will have an ongoing role in that. So I welcome that strong focus on reform, and with outside assistance, which we should welcome, to bring about that efficiency and reform.
I would, I suppose, just respectfully say this is a reserve claim. An unreserved claim, do you think we need to establish whether this, so a reserve claim had been talked about specifically in relation to the PSNI data breach. I think one was mentioned in broader terms, but we should establish from the department precisely when this discussion on the reserve claim came up, if it is additional, separate to the one that relates to the PSNI data breach. I also think it's important to say, obviously we need to be keeping across all the details on this, because I mean the executive restoration package came with conditions around reform 2 years ago, some of which have been met, but were relatively limited in scope. Others clearly haven't been met. So if this has emerged from new discussions that we weren't aware were happening between the UK government and either the executive or parties to the executive, then I think we need to understand precisely how that happened. I have to say, just as a chair of a devolved finance committee, quite apart from other political perspectives, I don't think it's entirely optimal that we're getting information about this via political party channels with slightly different emphases. Just say that, and we'll go to Jerry Carroll.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies, missed the start of this discussion. But in a general sense, obviously, this news shows that how easily the governments can find money when pressure is applied in a general sense. So obviously the whole economic system is based on a bit of a fallacy, to be frank, but this is money that's generally welcome. And if I heard your proposal correctly, Chair, you're proposing that we contact the Finance Department or the Minister to find out when these discussions took place. And if that's correct, I'm happy to support that.
Okay, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. I think it was more what has been agreed and what's the way forward was the point that you were making on it. And they just, as Gemma said, like I don't see how there's conflict in information really coming through here. It's good that we'll be working line by line and the executive will work with Treasury on this. But as you say, to get confirmation of what has been agreed is important.
I do think that, but I also think it would be helpful to understand the origin of these conversations. And I think that's our job as a devolved finance committee. So I think if we can just clarify that, not to be, it's not being conspiracist or anything, it's just simply to get clarity on that, and including whether they arose, for example, at a fiscal framework discussions. I think that would be, given we've asked before in the past where the fiscal framework is, and we occasionally get very kind of slightly convoluted, I have to say slightly Byzantine answers at times from officials. And then we get a moment like this where all of a sudden there's a new reserve claim has been agreed along with an entire open book, line by line, it may or may not be, budget exercise that the Finance Committee knew nothing about. So we have to resolve that. As a devolved Finance Committee, clearly if this has emerged from a clear blue sky, we're not doing our jobs, guys. If we just, oh, it's grand, this is wonderful, we've now got a line by line budget that it's going to be going through. Like, I think we do need to be told about these things in advance. Owen Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Chair, and I appreciate that the open book exercise is new information. But just to be fair, I mean, the Minister has referenced work on a reserve claim, I believe, previously in the
specifically in relation to the PSNI data breach. I'm not entirely, and he may have done other things, but
I think the Deputy First Minister had also referred to discussions with Treasury in the media in the past couple of weeks. So just to put that in perspective.
And us as Finance Committee getting that information is our jobs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I don't feel it's come entirely out of the blue. Some of the details, yes, but
I do feel, but anyway, we don't need to quibble over that. We need to find out the information.
it's also, Chair, sorry, just to
Yes.
finish that point. I mean, I wouldn't expect the Finance Minister to conduct a negotiation in public either. So it's absolutely important we get all of the details, but I'm not sure we were entirely unaware that there were conversations happening.
Well, 2 points. Number one, it is true to say that ministers develop policy and indeed negotiate on a devolved basis with UK government ministers, and they don't necessarily tell the relevant statutory committee every jot and tittle, to coin a phrase, of every conversation. However, the broad thrust of, we have asked the department on multiple occasions to be kept abreast of the in-year position and how it relates to the multi-year budget. They haven't done that in relation to this. They haven't told us this was the broad direction of a conversation. Now, maybe that was for good reason. We will establish that when they come back to us. It's our question to ask for more rather than less information. And I think curiosity is an important quality in any statutory committee. Nevertheless, so we'll get that information and we'll proceed from there. Okay, now 3.1, we'll go to Chairperson's business. 3.1 is a written ministerial statement, again on public expenditure allocations. And this is the one that came out last week. It was from Friday the 6th of February, and it relates, it was emailed to members the same day. It relates to some additional Barnett consequentials, not the full Westminster estimates. This is the January in-year technical exercise, so these are largely from reduced requirements from other departments. People will all have seen the WMS, and it was circulated. To members at the time. It also references, I believe, the delay in Westminster estimates, which is why we have the delay in our own spring supplementary estimates and voting account. Okay, members are content. Now, 3.2 is from the House of Commons Library Economic Indicators for Northern Ireland. Page 16 of the meeting pack, members will find extract for Northern Ireland from the House of Commons Library Economic Indicators is a useful indicator. Kind of thing I think that would be useful if the Fiscal Council were perhaps obliged to publish in some form every once in a while. I think that would be helpful, but that's just my view. Now, one other item of Chairperson's business from me relates to an item that is connected to some of the work we have done on financial services and the banking landscape here, and I wanted to essentially bring it to the committee's attention, and I'll be bringing it to the Minister's attention too. It relates to an issue of standards and financial conduct at a bank, namely the Bank of London, which had set up a presence in Northern Ireland, but is currently, I believe, in the process of winding down and closing its presence in Northern Ireland. Full disclosure, a constituent of mine brought an issue to me relating to a protected disclosure she had made in relation to practices at that bank, namely the employment of somebody who was convicted for fraud. She subsequently was unfairly dismissed by the bank and won an unfair dismissal claim against them. There's some very, I think, concerning revelations in that employment tribunal judgment around senior managers at that bank. So I have corresponded with both the FCA and the PRA, will be corresponding with the Treasury on it, but because it touches on my responsibilities as Finance Committee Chair, in the sense that we looked at financial services matters, I wanted to flag it to the committee. I'll also be writing to the Finance Minister. Obviously, he's not directly responsible, but he does have an interest. There are some very concerning revelations about issues at that bank. The individual who in question has been, I think, pretty courageous in terms of dealing with it. There were some very serious matters. This bank has its own issues. I won't go into them in significant detail, but it is concerning. We don't do financial conduct in this committee, obviously, but given some of the issues touched on financial services, which we looked into last year, I just wanted to flag to members. I'll ensure for anyone's interest that members have some of the press clippings in next week's.
Yeah, Chair, so we can access that in the press. We'll pin down, Chair, we can pin down that so members have the background.
But this bank was also had an involvement at one point, certainly in promotional terms, of a certain Lord Mandelson. So it's pretty concerning stuff. I just wanted to put it on the committee's radar because I will be corresponding with both the Finance Minister and indeed the Treasury. Steve Aiken.
Yeah, Chair, I fully agree. I think we just need to be, maybe we could take some advice behind the scenes, because I understand there's an NCA issue involved as well.
Ooh, right.
So we just need to be cautious.
I think it's, so I understand InvestNI made an offer of funding to the Bank of London. It was not taken up, is my understanding. But given some of the practices or some of what's been reported in the Employment Tribunal, I think it's pretty concerning, and I wanted to put it in the record, and I'll be flagging it with the Minister and the Treasury.
There's an office in Belfast?
There is an office in Belfast for the time being. It will be closing soon.
Yeah.
But there's no specific action for the committee. I just wanted to put it on the record and flag it to members. Members are content with that? Okay, so agenda item 4 is draft minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February 2026. So this is at page 18 of the meeting pack. If you're content with that the minutes at page 18 of the meeting pack are a true reflection of the proceedings, I will sign the minutes.
Right.
Okay. Now, agenda item 5, matters arising, Department of Finance, LCM, Public Accountability Bill. So members, at page 29 of the meeting pack, as discussed in last week's meeting, the scheduled debate on the LCM was not moved by the Minister. This was confirmed in correspondence. The Department indicates that officials will continue to engage with their Whitehall counterparts in the bill, and the committee will be advised when the Minister has an update on timing for the LCM, including, I suppose, when it happens. 5.2 is a related item, which is correspondence from the Speaker on the LCM. The Speaker replied to committee's correspondence, page 30 of the meeting pack. The Speaker replied to committee correspondence regarding difficulties surrounding timescales with LCMs. The Speaker indicates that he has written to the Procedures Committee on a number of occasions in this mandate to encourage it to carry out the necessary work to implement recommendations within its report to improve the LCM process. The Speaker also confirms that the scheduled debate in the LCM will not take place on the 9th of February. As we've just noted, we are awaiting further updates from the Department, so that's just a note. Members are content? Okay. 5.3 is the Dallow extract. It's page 34. Following the meeting on the 21st of February, the committee asked the Department of Finance for further information on a number of issues, which we will go through now. 5.4, assessment of impact of frontline services on the local growth fund delay. That's at page 35 of the meeting pack. So members, at our meeting on the 21st of February, the committee asked the Department, if it was aware of any ministerial or departmental assessments undertaken on the impact of the growth of frontline services. The Department has indicated that that the Minister and his officials are not aware of any such assessment. However, information was provided to NICVA, which was copied into the committee. So members, we are awaiting responses from the Chief Secretary of the Treasury and more recently from the Department following last week's discussion on this, and we are maintaining a watching brief. So it's to note, other than to say I am still slightly trying to get to the bottom. We know we will have more flexibility, and it'll be managed more in a more bespoke way, this fund from 27, 28. What we don't know yet, I still don't exactly know the cash amount that will be available to the sector from the start of the next financial year, 26, 27, and what flexibility around resource capital. So I'm just putting it on the record. We are trying, for the people in the community voluntary sector who are involved in economic and activity work and desperately want to find out, we as a committee are trying very hard to find out urgently. They may have had more of a steer themselves. I think the Deputy Chair wants to come in. Obviously.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to note, I chair the all-party group in voluntary community sector, but I don't necessarily think it's a conflict. It actually informs my thinking on this. I think that following on from this, and it's not so much necessarily, the Department of Finance in itself, but given that they sit centrally with the funding, the question that I had raised, I think that had led to this, was that I feel that whichever department or right across department that this is affecting and impacting, there doesn't seem to have been any activity by any particular department on what the impact on frontline public services will be from this in terms of who is being reached by these different things. So they've obviously attached this assessment by NICVA, and I have seen this. We've had this at the all-party group, and they outline quite a lot of detail about how many people are being supported, how many businesses, how many people are employed in it. There's a lot of detail in this, and I'm just really concerned that it's not being fully captured, and as we work through the details of what it actually means, I think that it's a really important thing that just needs to be owned by someone and assessed across the board. I raise it repeatedly through the all-party group. We do write to all the different ministers. We've engaged with some of them, but it's just that capturing of how many members of the public are getting reached by what, and what the impact is, as you say, on these frontline services, the economic activity. And even though the finance minister's saying his officials haven't done this, they've got this from NICFA. Should there be something coming through from Department for Economy, Department for Communities, the crossover over in those two as to the impact on the frontline services? That's where I was coming from with this question, even though obviously the funding side of it is, Department of Finance. I'm just concerned about, has anybody captured or quantified what it means on the ground? So I don't know if there's anything more we can
I think the
follow up through that.
No, I think the question is a really fair and important one, particularly given we know if well, obviously there's the people who are made redundant, who are like, and that's, they will, you hope they're able to find other work, but also people who are no longer doing the services. Is that a meaningful number of people who are going to, for example, be in receipt of either benefits or more benefits than they were, so I think that's, I think it's fair enough to go back and for us to say, perhaps it might be more, I don't know if it's useful for us to correspond with the communities and economy committees. I was just going to
suggest that we see if those committees have already started looking at this. They may well have already proceeded with this and have more information that we could possibly utilise. So if members are agreeable, in the first instance we write to both those committees and see what they are aware of and have done. I know we've seen correspondence come through from communities, so they're obviously looking at this as well. Chair, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, yes, and Chair, just briefly, it's just whenever this is sitting here and we're just talking about the funding and that, the structure of the funding, it sort of gets caught up in the quantification of the funding, what it means, and the value of it in terms of that. Whereas I just think we need to capture what it actually means for public services and people's lives.
That's fair enough, yeah, and I think make those points and to express our concern with the two committees that there's a. Okay, members content. Right, 5.5, City and Growth Deals Quarterly Progress Report. That's at page 42 of the meeting pack. So members, particular aspects to highlight include cost increases affecting some projects, and also the governance agreement for the Mid-South West Growth Deal. Obviously there was an issue around, is it from Anna Noma, vacating the
council chair didn't want to take the lead, so we weren't really sure as to what was happening. We have asked for clarification on that, which this doesn't answer. And
there are also shortfalls across different. Gemma Dolan coming in the Mid-South West.
I do have clarity on that, but I don't want to say it in public session because there's
a... Okay.
We can do that one of the closed sessions later on.
I appreciate that. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so members, there are other, this was a shortfall, and then there are other issues that show up. That's useful to have this update. Deputy Chair wishes to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to declare, my dad sits on your Morning Down District Council. This is quite brief, and I'm not sure, if there's more detail somewhere else, but I don't see any update on where they're at with reprofiling the Mourne Mountains Gateway tourism project, but that funding's at risk, and I would have thought that a project should have been well progressed or agreed right now. So I wonder, can we ask on that? It's not highlighted, and it is something that's at risk there.
Okay. Okay, members, so 5.6 relates to the 5-year education budget strategy. It's at page 45. Oh, sorry, yes. If we've agreed that we're going to seek all the information that we have just discussed and the details of the cost increases and shortfalls that are referred to in the update. 5.6 is from the Minister of Education, 5-year education budget strategy, and that relates to, so the committee agreed to seek clarity on the status of the publication in relation to the draft budget published by the Finance Minister and its relationship to departmental 5-year business plans, which were due to be published by every department. A response from the Department of Finance is awaited. So that's to note, members. At 5.7, it's from the Committee for Communities. Brian, did you wish to come in on that?
Yeah, just to say, I think this is actually a very helpful letter from the Communities Committee that they had a briefing from the department on, in particular on the Public Authorities Bill, which passed at Westminster at the end of last year. And I mean, this is a topic, maybe Jerry's dropped off there at the moment. It came up in our discussion on Good Morning Ulster yesterday regarding welfare, fraud and error, and that, as we've discussed before, we have the opportunity to retain an element of savings, particularly from benefit, fraud and error for Northern Ireland public services. But also there's the potential that we could actually face financial penalties if we're not addressing this issue. So it's not just an optional thing that we can choose to do or not do. There's significant investments happening across the UK to tackle fraud and error, and Northern Ireland will be expected to keep pace and maintain parity with that. So just in passing, I always thought the protocol is that one committee wrote to another. I note that the Communities Committee wrote directly to the Minister. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but certainly the least I would want is that we should be copied, that we should also receive the reply directly rather than having to receive it from the Communities Committee.
It might just be useful to come in on protocol is now. Previously we would have written to another committee and they passed on our correspondence. Now the protocol is committees will write directly to the Minister. They copy us in and then that Minister copies us in on the response, so we will get all the correspondence.
Will automatically?
Yeah.
Okay, but as I say, it's helpful for us to be aware, and there's been talk about how the paper which was brought forward by the Communities Minister, which I have been told hasn't been formally tabled at the Executive. Whether that's the case, I know a business case apparently went to Treasury. They seem to have been positive in their response. So it's just to know where this is, what's the next thing needs to happen to trigger the negotiations with Treasury, that we can actually bring extra funding to Northern Ireland by retaining a significant element of the savings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really one for us to keep across in relation to the Communities Committee. Obviously, we can, the Communities Committee will primarily scrutinise it, and we can keep in touch with it, keep on top of the information. So, 5.8 is Dallow extract in relation to everything that came back that we asked for on the 14th of January. So, 5.9 contingency plans for non-agreement of the multi-year budget. At page 5 of the table pack, which is page 5 of the table pack, on 14th of January, the committee asked the department for an update and details of any contingency plans in place in the event that a multi-year budget would not be agreed. The department has indicated that draft multi-year budget proposals have gone out for public consultation, and in parallel the Minister is continuing his engagement with his executive colleagues. This includes a series of bilateral meetings. The Minister is committed to working collaboratively and constructively with ministers to secure agreement on a multi-year budget. So, members, this is to note, except to say what we have back from to return to our point before about the importance of scrutiny and us asking questions and us not simply kind of accepting and welcoming things without interrogating them. We're simply told in this response that, well, there kind of isn't really one, there isn't really a contingency plan, and there isn't really other discussions going on. This response came before we got today's statement indicating that a reserve claim had been agreed and there was a discussion on an open book budget process. So I simply make the point that if we aren't doing our job as kind of scrutinising the department, then stuff will just happen, kind of and sail by us. I'm not totally satisfied with the answer from the department here, because it simply says that, well, there's engagement continuing with executive colleagues. The public were promised a multi-year budget. It is kind of unanimously said that a multi-year budget is essential to improving how public services work. We're now about a month and a half away from again not having a budget. So I think us asking these questions and being persistent is important. So to that end, I would ask that we, further to the announcement from the Finance Minister today, we say again, can we have an update on what the contingency plan is if one isn't agreed, and ask whether the discussion on the open book exercise and reserve claim were also part of a discussion on the multi-year budget. I think that's helpful to know. I think there's reasonable questions to ask, because we aren't clearly going to be told this information if we don't ask for it specifically. 5.10 relates to arm's length bodies. At the meeting on the 14th of January, the committee asked the department for a list of all arm's length bodies. A validated list has been provided. The department has also provided further detail on the definition of an arm's length body, and detail on the various classifications used in the list. So that includes things like executive agencies, non-departmental public bodies, non-ministerial departments, public corporations, north-south bodies, expert committees, and various other things. It's also interesting that we, I presume, some of these bodies will be maybe part of this line-by-line open book budget exercise, and I think that's a question we could usefully ask too. If the arm's length body review is there to say whether all these organisations are still necessary, is that part of the line-by-line budget exercise? I think that's a useful question for staff, but I'll bring members in and see if they have any comments on it. I think Deputy Chair does.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and this is really useful and I'm grateful to have it. I know I had probably asked for it a couple of times, but it shows how many different bodies there are, and as you say, I would support your comment and would ask that we do actually write alongside our correspondence around what is coming ahead, and encourage that this review of the budget takes this on board, because there's no point of this review of arm's length body occurring as academic exercise, to tick a box and have a report at the end of it. The review should actually be going alongside the transformative thinking and have this list of bodies sitting to hand, and just suggest that we really think this is a time to take the opportunity to do that, rather than, my understanding, because we had asked this, and I know the audit office were looking at this, and there's a whole exercise, and rather than have a report about arm's length bodies in 6 months' time, I think that
yes, I agree.
For us to highlight that, it would be us adding value and helping to direct efficiencies.
Indeed, agreed. Any other member wish to come in on that? No, we can move on then. Great. And lots of a few weird and wonderful new organisations I had no idea existed.
It's extraordinary.
Are tucked in there.
I wonder,
Quite an exceptional.
Chair, it does make me if we had a round table and tried to name all the arm's length bodies, I don't think we'd have got to 140. If we got to half of that, would have been doing well. It's quite revealing.
Okay, so we will now we'll move on. 5.11, use of additional resource data and pathways to work funding. Yes, sorry, I should have got agreement to share the ALB list with other statutory committees. I presume that I think will be useful for every other statutory committee. Members content? Okay. So 5.11 is use of additional resource data and pathways to work funding. That's at page 27 of the tabled pack.
Chair, just a wee comment on that. I mean, it's relevant to our earlier discussion.
I'll just read it out. This is the pathways to work.
Yes,
I'll just introduce the topic and then come in. At the meeting on the 14th of January, the committee asked for detail on the use of resource DEL, and if any bids had been received for pathways to work funding. The department has reiterated that Barnett consequentials are unhypothecated. Therefore, the executive has the discretion to allocate these in line with local priorities, regardless of the nature of comparable departmental spending that generated the Barnett allocation. It will therefore be a matter for the executive to decide how the 78.6 million is allocated. The Department for Communities submitted a bid of 30 million a year as part of the multi-year budget information gathering exercise. This bid covers the full suite of priority employment programmes, within which funding for pathways to work is included. Brian Kingston.
Yeah, this is relevant to our discussion on the Local Growth Fund, and I mean, again, this is an indication the Pathways to Work funding is going to grow at GB, England, Wales, certainly level over the coming years. I think it's 1 billion, I think was the figure for employability support. And again, it just highlights again the squeeze that we have this coming financial year on these employability support programmes at voluntary community level, and that there is the potential. I know, yes, the funding, Barnett consequentials are the discretion of the executive, but you'd like to think there'd be some expectation that equivalent, that there will be an element of that going towards the same line of support for people needing help into employment. So the Department of Communities submitted a bid of £30 million to cover a suite of priority employment programmes. So yeah, I don't know if that funding is actually allocated now. I know there was some allocation there that came out. But anyway,
towards communities, as in whether communities got any of that.
Yeah.
It'd be part of the multi-year budget. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Was that the statement? There was a small amount of funding allocated within the last week, but for what it's worth, I just think it's again an indication of the contraction there's going to be in these important programs this next year, and a loss of expertise, and projects which are some particular projects in towns and villages will be shut down, and then potentially would have to start up again from scratch. So I don't know whether we can write to the Finance Minister just highlighting how this is, the funding in England and Wales is being used for employability support, and our concern about the reduction in shared prosperity funding under the Local Growth Fund for that purpose.
Indeed. So, this is one of those things where, a person watching all of this would ask, why is the Local Growth Fund less, and why is there all this pressure on economic and activity pathways to work type funding whenever the executive is getting an amount of money that would probably more than cover the money that's lost via local growth, but it isn't being spent on economic and activity and pathways to work. It's just that historically we have tended, the historic decisions around how pathways to work are funded. I think we should ask to your point, Brian, I think we should ask the question more specifically, why isn't this money going to pay for the gap in local growth? Because I think an ordinary person would ask that question. Yeah,
and given that local growth fund will come under local control,
I know it's the
following year,
London,
so
but
it is the particular squeeze this coming financial year.
Yeah. Okay. Great. We'll ask that question about why that money, and obviously feeds into, because it is true to say that there was an amount of executive match funding that was saved after shared prosperity came in. The executive effectively saved an amount of money because they had to match fund the EU, the European Social Fund. That ceased happening in 23-24, I think, or 23, whatever it was, that financial year a few years ago. Okay. Now, next agenda item is, again, relates to Barnett consequentials. At the meeting on 14th of January, the committee asked for clarification on Barnett consequentials, volume, timing and flow. The department has indicated that most significant changes happen when budgets for Whitehall departments are set, and then a spending review, and then further adjustments are made at spring statement or autumn budget. Other fiscal events that may generate additional Barnett consequentials are spring supplementary estimates, which we are awaiting at the minute, and main estimates. Allocations received to the Barnett formula are unhypothecated, as we have just discussed, with some very rare exceptions. Okay. Okay, well, Barnett, to be fair, so I shouldn't say Barnett is never hypothecated, but there are specific UK government allocations that are occasionally hypothecated.
No, there are, yeah.
Okay. Right. 5.13 relates to increased rate rebate cost. Members, that's at page 29 of the table pack. On the 14th of January, the committee asked if the increased cost for rate rebate was normal and if it was the result of the move to universal credit. The department has indicated that it is normal at this stage of the financial year for budget adjustments to be made to reflect updated demand for rate rebate. Such adjustments ensure that funding is aligned with current caseload demand as claimants mitigate from legacy benefits to universal credit. This can result in increased eligibility for rate rebate to support citizens with a payment for rates. The increased budget requirement for rates rebate in the current financial year is higher than previous years, attributable to growth in caseload arising from the increased migration of claimants to universal credit. So that's to note, but that's a useful answer. Now, there's a Dallow extract, or a Dallow response from the 3rd of December, which relates to the multi-year budget and December monitoring round. At the meeting on the 3rd of December, the committee asked for an urgent update on the Minister bringing multi-year budget to the Assembly, which we have now seen. It says draft multi-year budget, obviously it's not yet agreed. Departmental officials have advised the response provided following a query raised at the meeting on the 14th of January should answer this. This can be found at page 5 of the table pack, and was also provided as a response to our query on contingency plans in the event of non-agreement to the budget. Most of that relates to stuff which we've already discussed in one form or another. I do think, however, members, once we get an answer from the department on what has been agreed and announced today, we will want to take a view on whether we take evidence, sharpish.
Chair, we have serendipitously.
Yes.
We do have the officials in next week anyway.
There you
on
go.
SSEs,
Here's one we made
VOA,
earlier.
and this kind of is part of the unpacking
okay.
of that, so we'll get coverage on that. Deputy Chair wants to go.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think on this, it just goes to show over these past couple of months how live all the financial matters are, because all of our queries are coming through, but things are coming through in live time. We're responding, there's ministerial statements, and we're doing all of that. But I just want to say thanks to the clerk team, because obviously we've had a lot of requests in, and this is sort of closing all of those out and showing that you know, all of the correspondence is followed through, and we have picked it up elsewhere. So just want to reflect that, because there's a lot and it's very live. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, members. So the next Dallo response relates to the query from the 19th of November. That's at page 33. Following the meeting on the 19th of November, the committee asked for an urgent readout of the budget announcement made on, which was then subsequently made on the 26th of November. So this is all really just tidying up requests.
Chair, a lot of this is falling out now because we've had December monitoring, we've had the January in-year technical. We're very close to completion of our SSE, so it's kind of everything, as the Deputy Chair said, now is finally working its way through for this financial year. So yes, that's useful and helpful.
So 5.18, clarity over 25-26 rates bills. That's the page 30 of the table pack. In response to a question from the Deputy Chair, the Minister has confirmed the rates bills will continue to be based on the 2033 valuation list, which was a point we had wanted to absolutely clarify. We had heard that from verbally from the witnesses last week, but we wanted to get it in writing, so that's useful that we got that via the Deputy Chair. 5.19, 5.20 is from the NI Retail Consortium, and it relates to their concerns regarding the rating system. They have corresponded with us, including an infographic explaining the additional burden placed on their sectors. That was written to me in my capacity as chairperson. We shared it with the committee. Obviously, members, we may want to have the NI Retail Consortium come in front of us and offer them the opportunity, as we offered the other stakeholder groups in the kind of months ahead, so we can keep that as a kind of an open potential invite, given that we are looking, we believe, at the rating system in more detail. Members can tell with that, but we don't need to schedule it now, but we can come back to it. Agenda item 6 is the Administrative and Financial Revisions Bill, but we're not having a briefing now, are we? Yes, we're just a couple. So we are going to, we're going to 7.
Do a bit of background, then we'll go into closed.
So I'm going to shoot to 7, yeah.
We can go through that one anyway.
We'll go through the background.
It's still
things, a live agenda.
Things to be said are still
okay.
live,
There are things to be
we
said.
did
Okay.
get a briefing note.
So we need to go through and agree things. Okay.
Yeah.
So members, page 57 of the meeting pack. This is the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill, the oral briefing we were going to have with the Department of Education, but we still need to discuss some of the ancillary matters. So at page 57 of the meeting pack, first of all, there's a briefing paper at page 46. That's at clause 11 of the bill. Briefing paper from the Department of Education is clause 11. The Committee for Education response is at clause 11. That's at page 60. The response from the committee. The Department of Finance correspondence regarding this, regarding an expansion of clause 11 is page 62. Department of Education response is at page 64 of the meeting pack. So members, there's currently one clause in this bill as drafted for which the Department of Education has responsibility. That is the one relating to postgraduate qualifications in educational psychology. This will provide the Department of Education with a specific power to make payments to both students and to higher education bodies in respect of a bespoke postgraduate course in educational psychology. However, the committee has been informed that the Education Minister wishes to expand this clause to include the power to introduce a new initial teacher education bursary scheme. The Education Committee has completed its scrutiny of the clause, indicating that it is content with clause 11 as drafted. So members, we were due to have a session today, obviously. We're due to have one on the 28th of January. But on Monday, an email was issued from the Education Dallo indicating the lead official was now unavailable and asking if this session could be again rescheduled. The truth is, we don't really have time now to reschedule it for our discussions, and
The written briefing
covers most of what we need to understand without being too complacent about it. So members, there is a paper on clause 11 of the bill which was received. That is, as I said, as I've already mentioned, is in the pack. First of all, members, so you can note the paper and we can discuss it when we talk about the options paper for the bill in the next agenda item. Can I have agreement that we publish, that we add the Department of Education's briefing paper to the evidence-based bill folder and the committee report in due course?
Thank you.
Our members agreed to inform the Education Committee about today's session and of course any agreement that we raise or that we come to. Yes. Page 67 of the meeting pack, there's correspondence from the Minister for Infrastructure regarding clause 17 of the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. This committee had asked the Minister about modelling carried out regarding the level of fee which will be charged for a smart pass. The Minister has reiterated that work is still in the early stages of policy development, but the final level of fee will depend on two factors: the administrative costs of operating the scheme and the categories on which the fee would be levied. Any income from the smart pass fee will be used to meet the administrative costs associated with processing applications. By covering these costs, the Department may free up resources elsewhere within the overall budget, which could in turn support the enhancement of concessionary arrangements in future. Decisions in this regard remain subject to future policy development, the availability of resources and wider priorities across the Department. The Minister has indicated that she is actively considering the option to extend the half-fare concession to free travel. Our officials are currently working in close collaboration with TransLink to consider how this policy could be implemented should budget be made available. Finally, the Minister has indicated she will write to the Minister of Finance to request that his department tables the necessary amendment to give effect to using the draft affirmative procedure for the regulations to establish a smart pass fee. So members, are we agreed to copy this correspondence to the Infrastructure Committee and to add this response to the evidence-based bill folder and committee report in due course? Are we agreed? Yep. Agenda item 7, Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill Options Paper. Members, at page 72 of the meeting pack, there's a clerk's memo outlining the options for consideration today. Also included to assist members in their deliberations are correspondence from the Finance Minister dated 1st of July 2024, page 77 of the meeting pack. A Department of Finance briefing paper from way back in September 2024, page 105. Department of Finance correspondence at page 114. AFP bill, the full text of the bill, page 116. The explanatory financial memorandum 136, the research paper in the bill 152. Anyway, you've had all that. The members' purpose of this session is to consider an overview of the evidence received to date, highlight common themes, and to outline potential options for next steps, including possible amendments. We are going to discuss these in closed session, which we're going to go to now. Thank you.
Members agreed, yep.
Members agreed to go into closed session? Yes.
So sound is immediate, pretty much. Picture's not, so...
Okay, well I can read into it. So members, we're back into open session. Two things, two items that we discussed in closed session, which we will get agreement on. Number one is that we agree post hoc to the request from the Education Department officials to withdraw from the specific oral briefing they were going to give us, but acknowledge they have given us relatively detailed written briefing. Members, are we content not that we can, subject to, obviously we'll be debating this in full plenary at some point in the months ahead, but we are content to proceed without an education oral briefing on this matter, but we will obviously be reporting of content. Yep. The second agenda item is that we have discussed the potential for a committee amendment or explore with the department whether they would be minded to amend themselves relating to, I think, clause 18, is it, of the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill relating to the use of the consolidated fund and the increase in limit. So the clerk team are going to come back with options for us next week if members are agreed. Agreed?
Thank you.
Okay. Now we are moving on to a similar agenda item 8, which is Fiscal Council Bill and further committee deliberations. We had a useful discussion last week, quite a detailed one. At page 51 of the meeting pack, there is a revised options paper has been amended to take account of last week's deliberations. The written summary of the issues raised and the evidence received thus far in the Fiscal Council Bill is at page 57. A copy of the Fiscal Council Bill itself is at page 84. A copy of the explanatory and financial memorandum is at page 104. The protocol between the NIPSO and NIAO, which is something that we discussed when we were talking about memoranda of understanding, is at page 208. So members, what we're doing again today is having a further discussion on evidence received, common themes and potential options for next steps, including any further discussion on amendments. And thankfully we have both, obviously again, the bill clerk for the same bill with us. So if we're agreed, we'll go into closed session. Okay, members, so we're back in open session. We had a very useful discussion about the Fiscal Council Bill and potential committee amendments. We are further that discussion. Our clerking team and indeed the bill clerk will be going away, and we will come back with further options to be discussed next week or at a future committee hearing. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So the next agenda item is agenda item 13, which is performance and culture of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. The committee inquiry terms of reference. We've now confirmed that we are able to proceed with our committee inquiry, but we will talk a little bit about the NIAO report and the PAC in a closed session. But we'll
Chair, now, if members don't feel the need to go into closed, we
I'm
talked
sure
about
do.
revisions, Chair, to the terms of reference previously. So if members are content, and Deputy Chair wants to come in.
I am content. I think they cover broadly, but if members want to go in, so I'll just tell where they are, and then I'll bring a Deputy Chair. So page 116 of the table pack, there's a draft terms of reference for the committee inquiry. At page 116 of the table pack, there's draft terms of reference. 117 is the copy of the Audit Office report. I'm not sure we need to go into closed session,
Chair,
particularly this
happy
sensitive.
Yeah,
Deputy Chair
thank
wants
you.
to go
in. Yeah.
You know, I was pleased this came across. I think it's better with us, but I was just going to ask, given that we already had our terms of reference, then this report has come out as a first step. Should we invite someone in to discuss how they've reacted to the report in case they're doing something urgently in response to the report that would change things as to our inquiry, just to get a heads up? How have you received this report? What's the initial plans?
We could ask them for
We
a
get that quite quickly through the Dal readout.
Just in case it changes the shape of what we've done,
that's
because
fine.
it might have redirected some of their attention. So that was my only.
Yes, I think that's true. I think it's fair.
Chair, if members are content, we'll seek that information from the department, and if members
We can return to the draft terms of reference if we need to.
if we need to. But if members are content for the time being, we'll
Members are
run
content with the
what
draft
we
terms of
have.
reference, which we have discussed a couple of times before. People content?
Yep. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. I think that's us then with that
That's
agenda
us
item.
for that one.
Excellent. So now we can go on to agenda item 9, which is correspondence. 9.1 is memorandum of reply to the PAC report on general practice in Northern Ireland. It's at page 221. The department has laid its formal memorandum of reply to the PAC report, access to general practice in Northern Ireland. We've been copied into it as the department has primary responsibility for laying MORs, even when we are not responsible for the policy area. That's to note. The department, I should say, it's not that we have primary responsibility, it's the department has primary responsibility. The Department of Finance has primary responsibility for laying memorandums of reply to PAC reports. Which is
why we always see them.
Which is a pleasing little anomaly, but we don't need. It means we get sight of all these reports or these replies. 9.2 is the Youth Assembly. They've given us a January update. 9.3 is the Examiner Statutory Rules. No rules relevant to us. Yet item 10 is the Forward Work Programme. We have just a couple of things to say. Sir Robert Choate has a diary clash, and it's quite a defensible one because it's to do with other matters which are very pressing around the OBR. We have and some other things which I think the clerk might want to update us on.
Yeah, so, as Chair says, Sir Robert is in front of the Treasury Committee around the OBR leak to do with the autumn budget. So the Chair and Deputy Chair have agreed that Alan Barnett will lead on that. He actually was the key lead on the budget analysis report anyway. So he will present that. We also have confirmation for the 11th of March for a written briefing on the census. Members will recall that the department had flagged up they're in preparation for that. And we'd previously agreed to schedule a briefing on the implementation of legal complaints and regulation legislation. with the Legal Complaints Commissioner, and the officials are suggesting 22nd of April for that one, which takes us after Easter. And that would be an oral briefing with the new Commissioner, because they should be in position by that stage, I think. And there'd be a handover, yes, there'd be a handover by that stage as well. So if members are content with those, then we can proceed.
Members content?
Thank
Yep.
you, Chair.
Okay, so
Chair, are we just 2 o'clock starts, or are we?
Next week is 2 o'clock we have, yeah. We're going to start, we'll be starting at 1 next week.
okay.
They won't all be, that's kind of where there's a bit of chopping and changing purely because
I'm
we've
rather
got
relaxed. If you
cancellations
have
and ups
not a
and
messy
downs.
lunch, you can eat it subtly
Yeah.
underneath your desk. I won't be too.
I didn't hear that.
No,
I'm not
that's
sure you
fine.
said that. I'm
1 o'clock next
happy
look
to.
for 1
We're not giving you
o'clock
lunch, but
next
I'm happy that
We
people
will
have something they can eat.
give you a bit
hygienically and
more,
served
and
digitally.
try and go up with a bit more forward planning on those, because we do have an idea of at least the next few, so we'll come out with a table on those.
Okay. So we have a suggested a proposed visit around the Integrate programme. Now, I'm not sure why they want to invite us, given what happened the last time after the LP. We were invited to LPS. We aren't necessarily back on the Christmas card list, but anyway. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, we are. But anyway. So members, this is it is relevant to forthcoming committee matters. Integrate is obviously a very large-scale project. So the proposal would be to visit on the 15th of April. It would be in place of a formal committee hearing that day. That we can discuss this. My only question about that date actually is, when are we back? When do we break up for Easter? When's our last
That's our
meeting?
first meeting after Easter.
But what's our final meeting before?
The final meeting before will be, I'm mentally working this out, 25th of March. Yeah, so that's our final meeting before we to agree our reports on both the bills. So the bills will leave.
I think that'll be quite a big meeting, in part also because we will know. I mean, I would hope this isn't the case, but that's the final meeting before the end of the financial year. Yes,
It
25th
is.
of March. I would hope the executive has a budget agreed by then.
I think that would be our hope.
Yes,
too.
I think that's a very diplomatic
I
way of putting it.
think,
But
Chair,
I suppose, yeah.
next week's briefing is probably going to be quite, I'm going to say this and it probably won't be, I would have thought there's a fairly significant amount of news that officials will be able to give us next week, because obviously things are moving quickly. We have the reserve claim and so on, and they'll be able to give us the latest on the situation in terms of agreement of the executive budget. We don't necessarily know any schedule for the executive to meet on this, but one would assume there need to be discussion around it. So I would hope next week we'll be able to get a good, clear understanding from officials about what we're looking into, because as you say, the financial year is not very long after that. But we will keep that very much on our radar, Chair, and we can look and see what happens for that stage. Yes.
Okay. My only comment would be we may, because we will. I'm keen to do the visit. I suppose the only thing is, if given there may be a particular pressure point around scrutiny, there may be
Chair,
things
are you
between.
proposing that we'll consider doing it like the week later? Is that a possibility?
I suppose
No?
what I'm proposing is we just keep it slightly with a degree, a 10% tentative, in part because I just would ever slightly worry about not having a committee meeting
Chair,
between.
if I can rush in off a reassurance there,
Yeah.
Still have our meeting.
that was very much a, perhaps we don't have to have a meeting, not, that's not going to happen because it can't. So it was really just
Yeah,
a
I do want. I
toe
do
in
think
the
we should do
water.
that. I do. We do that. My slight, my ever so slight worry is
One would assume we can.
if there's some degree of uncertainty at our meeting on the 25th of March, and we're close to the end of the financial year, and then we aren't meeting in open session again for a month, and so it's not that we shouldn't do it. it's that I think we should leave just a degree of flexibility that we can think about next
What
week.
we did, we checked the logistics. We just weren't sure whether the logistics for a meeting would be in place. So we will need to do a site visit then on that.
It may be that there's not. It's just I'm kind of knowing some of the budget.
No,
pressures
absolutely.
stuff,
And
I think
it's extraordinarily rare. We've never done it before where we've had a visit without a meeting. This was really just in case the logistics didn't work. But we'll have a look at that.
Okay.
And I can't imagine that it will be.
It's really just the proximity to
Something
the end of the
preclude.
financial year and the potential for, but it may be.
We'll check that out.
Okay,
just in
that's
case
grand.
we can
So,
do
members,
it.
we will then, I suppose, with a caveat, we'll start working on that visit for the 15th of April. Understand that may change, but we will do it in principle. We're in principle happy to do the meeting, and we are. We're going to get a yes, that's true. We're going to get a list of agenda items from the Department of Finance to assist planning. To say this politely and gently to our friends at the Department of Finance. What we don't need, particularly at this stage of the mandate, is a list of stuff that's kind of happening but isn't really going to crystallise. It's stuff that is immediately relevant to the multi-year budget and other known pressing priorities for our committee, including civil service reform and the broader transformation piece. Indeed. So, but if members are content, we will amend the forward work programme. So if we're content to ask for that, to make that request of the department, and obviously we retain the right at any point to request briefings on any subject. Members, we will update the forward work programme accordingly, and we'll publish on the committee webpage as everyone's agreed. Agenda item 11 is any other business. Is there any other business?
Yes,
Deputy Chair.
just very quickly, it was through the Youth Assembly. I just wondered, would there be opportunity under our inquiry to ask the Youth Assembly about their perceptions of recruitment and coming
that's
in
a
as
really good
an
idea.
apprentice and graduate into the civil service
Excellent
or
idea.
something, just to try to profile that in?
I think that's a really excellent idea.
That's also a really good idea around our questionnaire for the Balmoral show.
Yeah.
If members are going to, we can start working on that, because we've obviously indicated to engagement that we'll go down to the Balmoral show. We're looking for a particular topic to look. Like members who were there last year will recall, members were able to get out and engage with people around the questionnaire we had with the financial services and banking inquiry. So that could form the basis actually of a really quite interesting survey.
Yeah.
So members are content. We'll start work on that. We'll involve
Yeah.
the Youth Assembly too.
I think that's really good and useful thing to do. Okay, members, no other. We're content. We will go to date, time, place of next meeting, which is here Wednesday, 18th of February at 1 o'clock in the Senate chamber. I'll put the question. The committee is now adjourned. The committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Chair. Marion.